What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2018 Innovation Award winner given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And one of the other things I do is once a month, I host and co-produce online conversations for fathers that are co-sponsored by DAD, Central Canada's National Fatherhood Organization, and Dove Men Care. And it's getting near the end of August, and what happens in September? Becomes autumn, leaves. Oh, school. Yes, school. And has this been some kind of school year or what? Well, this is what we're going to be chatting about tonight. And specifically, we have a very good conversation topic tonight. We have the topic of Black parents' involvement in their children's academic success. And this is more important than ever, ever, ever. And the nice thing is we have two new friends of the Dr. Vibe Show who are going to be coming on and sharing about it. Now, ladies first is always in the Dr. Vibe Show tradition. And we have Dr. Grace-Camille Munroe. And the wonderful thing is Grace and I spoke a while back. She was watching one of the conversations and she said, I'd like to come on. And that was a few months ago. And I said, some people would just forget or say, no, I'm not ready. But she's kept her commitment. She kept her word. We have her tonight. And Dr. Grace-Camille Munroe holds a doctorate in adult education and community development with a focus on transformative learning from the Ontario Institute of Studies in Education of the University of Toronto. She has acquired the knowledge, experience, and skills required to make interventions as a competent project manager, program evaluator, research and analyst, and adult facilitator. In this regard, she has employed her skills successfully in designing and evaluating projects, conducting qualitative and quantitative research, data and policy analysis, and preparing research briefs, reports, cabinet submissions, and presentations for clients across the public and private sector. Dr. Monroe has significant experience in the developing of monitoring and evaluation frameworks for educational programs, and in conducting needs assessments to inform the improvement of school administration and management. She's committed to employing her expanding knowledge and skills to projects and programs that will result in an improved quality of life for stakeholders in education. She has worked at various levels of the education system in Jamaica, including Ministry of Education, as senior policy analyst and researcher in the Office to the Minister, to appreciate the complex nature of teaching and learning in the classroom, and to allow her to better access the challenges of developing and implementing system-wide change. She currently works as the manager for research, projects, and operations for the Leadership by Design program, the signature program for the Lifelong Leadership Institute. Just a little bit about the Lifelong Leadership Institute. It's an educational organization that provides innovative leadership development to Canadian youth of Jamaican, African, Caribbean, and Black heritage, so that they may fulfill their personal and professional ambitions, provide inspiring leadership to their communities and country, and make this world a better place for all. That was a long introduction, but she is more than worthy. Dr. Grace, please come and join us.
Hi, I have to pay you well for that lovely introduction, Dr.
Well,
Vibe.
man, I was about ready to fall over. You have to cook something for me after that. That was hard. That was hard. How are you this evening?
I'm doing very well. I'm doing very, very well. Thank you so much for asking and for allowing me this opportunity to be on your program.
It's our program.
Yes, indeed.
It's ours. And we are joined by Anton James. I don't know too much about Anton James, but Dr. Grace wanted him part of our conversation. So let's welcome Anton James. Come on in, my brother. How are you, sir?
Not bad at all. Thank you so much for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Well, it's not my invitation. It's the lady in the middle. I had nothing to do with it. She said, I want him on. I said, I just bow. I said, yes.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Monroe.
Well, you know what? It's very great. It's very good to have both of you on this evening, because this is a very important subject education is always important for our youth, but even more so what's going on this year, an unprecedented year. So before we get into that, education, Black children, Black parents involvement, you know what? We got enough about Dr. Grace. Anton, share a little bit about yourself.
Well, sure. I don't, my introduction won't be quite as colorful.
Oh, I know. Maybe next time she's on, you can read it for me. All right.
Very nice. Very
All
nice.
right. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So it's very simple. From a schooling perspective, went to school both in the USA, then returned back to Canada, U of T. Went there after I graduated. I got recruited straight into UPS, where I did their marketing and strategy for about 6-7 years. Left there, took a couple companies, went to some startups, took a couple companies public. I spoke around the world, with the highlight being I spoke at United Nations in Switzerland, advising countries and companies how to effectively implement strategies and programs to table and compete in the global marketplace. Did consulting for many years, and have had marketing, sales, communication teams. That's from a career perspective. Personal perspective, I'm a father of 2 kids.
All right.
A boy, 1 girl. And girl is 12, going on 30, and my son is 11, and he thinks he's 40. Yeah.
All right. Well, let me ask both of you, and this time we'll go to ladies first, Dr. Grace.
Yes.
How did education find you, or did you find education?
I think it's that it found me. My mother was a teacher. In my mind, once a teacher, always a teacher. And I used to watch her as a child, as she was in class, and I was fascinated by the care that she took with her students, how they responded to her. And I thought from that time, I still remember just watching her from the classroom, that I wanted to do the same thing. No, in my mind, I was bitten by the bug. I tried my hand at teaching. I don't know how teachers do it, because it was probably the most challenging experience of my professional life, dealing with multiple students with multiple behaviors, multiple expectations. And I thought, you know what, the classroom isn't for me. However, what I do want to do, though, is to have a better understanding of the dynamics of teaching and learning. And so I decided to commit myself to studying education, and more specifically, the teacher-student relationship, the homeschool relationship, with a view of seeing how I can bridge the gap that regressively exists between the home and the school, but also empowering teachers to be more effective in how they deliver instruction. And from the student side is how they can be more academically efficacious in terms of their classroom practice and involvement.
Thank you. Anton,
Yes.
what you shared with us, I didn't hear much about education. So how did you get into this journey involving education?
I guess mine's a little bit different. From the time I was 6 years old, my educational track was pretty much set. In terms, my whole family, we always had a track. From Canada, you go down here, we go to a private school. Then from there, we're going down to the States. And at the time, so I went down from here, same thing. I followed the track, went down to the States, was in pre-law. Then I had some family shakeup, so I decided to come back to Canada. My brother stayed down there, and he went over to France for school. And I came back, and I went to U of T. Later went on back, was going on for the MBA and so forth. But we've always been from a family perspective, always been a firm believer in education as an access, and also giving you the ability, as many times you see many friends growing up and they're taking different tracks and you want to stay, divert for whatever reason. I always knew education was, as my parents would tell me, it was knowledge. Knowledge opens doors. Knowledge keeps the doors open, because, finances, connections can open doors, but it won't keep it there. So you have to have the ability to have the resources, knowledge, and experience to not only affect your lives, but able to affect the lives of others, your family to come, your community, and so forth, and make a bigger impact. So education was always a key component from the time I was a child. Oh, I can't hear you.
How did you two meet?
How did we meet? At a social gathering, we were at a friend's barbecue, and I was sharing about my experience with my research project, which was my dissertation looking at the involvement of parents in the education of their children in Jamaica. And Anton started sharing some experiences that were very similar to mine in terms of a household that was very strict about education. Yes, and silver and gold will vanish away, but a good education.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he ended it so said, a man after my own heart. And it was after that we started talking and sharing experiences. And I was just fascinated though by his commitment to the education of his children, especially in an environment where we're oftentimes told that Black people don't care about education, they're not interested in education, and more so that fathers are absent. And I wanted him to come on to be that ambassador that this is not true.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Let's get right into our conversation topic about Black parents and their commitment / involvement when it comes to education. Each one of you, give us an overview of maybe some of the stereotypes, some of the truths, some of the non-truths, and some of the barriers that Black parents face when dealing with the education system. So both of you, go for it.
From a research perspective, as I mentioned earlier, my dissertation dealt with this situation. I was in Jamaica at the time, and there was a task force report that was produced in 2004 that said on page 7, I still remember the page, that the quality of the education system in Jamaica was being negatively impacted by many factors, including the inadequate participation of parents. And I really wanted to understand what inadequate meant from an academic perspective, but also that if it does exist, what could we do to influence the behavior of parents to get them more involved? Because again, the research is very clear and undisputed that when parents are involved in the education of their children, the children succeed. The success is extremely heightened. Better parent-teacher relationships, but also strengthened homeschool relationships. And so, as I said, I wanted to examine that. But there was another issue when I started asking my colleagues what was meant by this, and they kept on saying over and over that parents they're just not interested. And I kept on asking, but what is the evidence of parents not being interested? And I was flabbergasted in that it was just a few parents who may not have turned up to school at a particular parent-teachers meeting. And as a result of that, the rest of the parents were then being broad brushed as being uninterested. But then when I had the opportunity of really exploring the issue of this uninterested parent, what happened is that parents, this is again based on the research that was conducted between 2004 and 2008 in Jamaica, is that across the economic structure, the class system that exists there. So that is whether you're poor parent, parent from the higher income, that parents want to become involved in the education of their children. The issue is just that they are not sure how to effectively participate in the education of their children. There also exists certain barriers in terms of perception that parents don't know how to do. And so there's this deficit model that schools tend to look at parents. And so they treat parents almost as from a paternalistic manner. In other words, well, if you don't come, well, we won't do. And so the research again showed that where in examples, and these are very best practices that we're seeing in Jamaica, that where schools created a family-friendly environment, established structured parental involvement opportunities and means, that parental involvement was very high. Another issue that I've often heard about this topic is that fathers are not interested. Fathers are absent, as a matter of fact, when it comes on to the parenting of their children, and in education, that is. And so what I came to realize was that there was a theory around the feminization of parental involvement, where the school's expectation is not to see the father, but rather to see the mother. And as a result of that, their engagement of fathers in the education of their children was rather very, very limited. But then again, the studies show that where fathers were involved, they were totally involved in the education of their children because for a number of reasons, they may have had a really bad experience growing up. And so I remember them saying, there was one gentleman who I remembered his name, Dedicated Donovan. He was a security guard, worked very long hours, but he made it very clear to his children that I have seen what that limited education has done, which is that it has not given me the opportunity to thrive, but I want you, my children, to thrive, and therefore I'm investing in education with you. I will be there with you. And I remember him sharing with me that at nights when he got home, his children better know that when he got home, their homework needs to be on the table so that he can view it, and where needs be, he always made himself available at the parent teachers meeting. So in essence, there are a lot of myths, I would consider them, and misinformation that exists around Black parents and again another subset of fathers being in the education of their children. But what it really comes down to is that I believe that those are very simplistic means of trying to understand a very complex and very layered issue of parental involvement, because there are just so many other competing variables with respect to that. So the school does have a responsibility to create that space. But in addition to that, the parent also, especially in our environment now, we're very racialized environment, that our parents now more than ever will have to stand up and be advocates for their children.
Excellent. Anton, I want to bring you in on a few conversation pieces here. First of all, Dr. Grace has you here because you're doing something good. So I want to know, where does the root come from about having such dedication for your kids when it comes to education, and what barriers have you had to encounter, if any, as a Black father dealing with the education system?
Oh, wow. Those are some pointed questions right there.
Well, you know what, Dr. Grace, she said you're good, so I'm getting my money's worth tonight.
All right. So, well, the first, what's the base? Well, ultimately, just recognizing what the situation is. Kids are gifts. They're really a gift from God, and ultimately, at the end of the day, when all is said is done, I'm not going to be held accountable to what car I drive and what my bank account or what my this or my that was. It really is what did I do for my children? What, my goal, as I think every parent's goal should be, is my kids should be A, better than I ever was in all aspects, and B, they should have the resources and all the tools to enable them to let that happen, and C, that that they are the priority. The reality is, I think oftentimes society as a whole has structured people to think of themselves so much that they've forgotten the bigger picture. The bigger picture is, yes, you are to enjoy life and live your best life, but simultaneously your bigger responsibility is the ones behind you, and not only for yourself but your generations to come, in terms of a legacy, in terms of your responsibility, and in terms of your view of how we can integrate into making an effectiveness of the community. So for me personally, from a family, from a moral, from a spiritual perspective, my kids are my priority. That's just full stop. Everything else is secondary to that. That's to answer the first question there. Your secondary question is, what adversities have I faced? Well, mercy. I don't think we have that much time on this phone, on this message here. Yeah, for sure. You know what? Ironically, there is a very strong stereotype, as I'm sure most would believe, and most, that men may not be involved, or may not have interest, or may not want to. There's a lot of may nots, or they should not, or they have not, or they cannot, or they don't want. And those are, to me, they're fallacies. They're absolute fallacies. I think, again, it's a matter of perspective. You know, society as a whole has taught people to become more and more um, self self-focused. You know, focus on you, focus on what you can get, focus, and that's not universal. I think the problem is the squeaky wheel gets the most noise, whereas, you know, people in society, they're focused to socialize. Men don't socialize or at least vocalize a lot of their challenges they go through as much as other, you know, maybe potentially women or other groups and so forth. And so there's a certain perception. But without a shadow of a doubt, I don't, you know, I thank you guys for your positive compliments, but even in that comment itself, it's always a funny when I hear people say that you're a fabulous dad. That's not a, you know, to me, that's not a bragging point. You're supposed to be a fabulous dad. So, you know, it's hard for me to really respond to that. I don't really understand how to say that. But to your second question is, you know, what adversities have I been encountered with or had to overcome? Oh, if I can't even nearly begin to tell you how many I have in terms of from schooling. You know, yes, going to appointments with schools and the teachers, initially trying to just totally ignore you and go and talking to the mother and saying, well, what's the scenario? I'm like, yes, she's my wife, but, you know, listen to me, I'm right here. And they're trying to play, you know, they're speaking in certain ways. Well, when I go to school, to my kids' school, all the teachers know me, not only the teachers, the administrative. And the reason why, because I don't just go to school when it's parent-teachers night. I go to school, I call at least once a month if there's a problem with any particular thing. I'm not waiting to find out what the problem is or waiting for them. I'm calling the meeting. And I'm calling the meeting and I'll find out exactly what the challenge is and what resources. And so from an education perspective, I've had challenges. I've had challenges where they've tried to be dismissive in terms of my involvement and tried to give me, soft answers. Well, you know, don't worry about it. I'm sure the child will be fine. And, oh, they're doing okay. Well, don't tell me my child's going to be okay, because that's not universally told to all children and all parents. You know what? I be honest with the truth, I don't care about how the kids are doing. How are my children doing? What resources are you doing here? Here's the challenges. So one, you're grouped into the don't worry about it, they're doing fine. Mm-hmm. Assuming that your response is that you're comfortable with okay or fine. And I'm not. I think excellence is really the goal in all aspects, and not to the extent where you're holding them a higher standard in which they can attain. My thing, I want excellence. And excellence, doesn't mean that they have to be doctors, kings, princes. No. If my child, say hypothetically, the best they could do was a C, well then I don't want a D. Now my children, that's not for them, thank God, but as an example, so I'm educationally, what resources, what tools, how are you helping them? How are you focusing on them? How are you enabling them? On a resources perspective, similarly, all the other kids get certain resources, are getting computers and they're handing out. Well, don't worry about it, you can share and we'll work. Well, no. Advocating on that aspect when you're, trying to get access into programs. Well, you know what? Sending emails, I'll send an email and they'll send it to the mother. They'll say, okay, well, here's what's going through. And I've noticed there's women's groups and parents groups. And there's no fathers in these parents groups. And I'm like, no, I want to be involved in these parents groups. What's actually going on? What's the agenda? And when you go to these parents groups, even inside the parents groups, they're talking about, bake sales and so forth. And that's good. Don't misunderstand me. But they're more geared towards female-oriented aspects. And that's great. I'm not trying to diminish those ones. But what about the academics? What about, when I go to the schools, I'm not there to be your friend. I'm not there to be adversarial in any way, but I want to be very clear. I am my child's advocate, and that is what I come to do. I advocate for the progress of my child. I advocate for the progress of the children that don't have voices, and it oftentimes seems to be the children that seem to be diminished the most or disenfranchised the most appears to somewhat look like me in terms of their hue or lack thereof of melanin or excess melanin. And so I advocate for, in those parent-teacher meetings, for children such as not only my own, but other kids as well. I advocate for those resources. I get involved when I see problems, and I have elevated many scenarios to administration, to getting resources from the schools, to going to the board level. Also, simultaneously, as you asked earlier on, my involvement with school and education. Well, as I said, my kids are 12 and 11, and they've had tutors since their time. They're in grade 2. Some not just because they needed challenges, but to overcome. When I went to kindergarten, when my son first went to kindergarten, ironically, my kindergarten teacher told me that I was mean, and the parents told me that I was mean. And the reason why, so before my son went to school, he could speak French, he could read, he could write, he could do math. And they're saying, well, how do you teach him that? And I said, well, you know what? I taught him. I focused and I sat down there and I taught him. I said, well, he should be playing. I said, he's just like any other child. He plays, does everything else. But you know what? I focus on certain things. They're sponges. And if you teach them, they will learn. Make things interact and make things fun, and they will learn. Just because your child is saying, I don't know what I'd be saying and not speaking properly, that's not because they don't have the capacity. It's just you believe that your child is limited to speaking to him like he's a gerbil. I believe he's an intelligent little boy. Mm-hmm. And so I'll say, you know what, here. To my daughter, you know what? No, they're not limited by societal norms. You know what? Just because you're a girl, that means you have to cook and clean. And no, why can't they be just as educated and as successful? Anything a guy can do, there's no diminished capacity because you don't have testicles. There's no diminished capacity in terms of your dream and aspiration. You're only diminished by what you're fed. And so my thing is, I feed them everything. I feed them what they want and see where their goals and aspirations lie out. And that's what I've been played, and that's my mentality, and that's what I try to do. And then secondly, this know your child. I know when some child they're where they excel, but Newton's law always comes in. People go to the path of least resistance. Sometimes kids just don't want to do anything. It's not because they can't, it's just because they don't want to. So understanding when and where to push and how to push, and also push within the resources not only given by school, but where to push outside. Again, my mentality is you're either going to pay for schooling now, or you're going to pay for it later on. So I've done brain-based, math-based tutoring for years. I've got French tutors, I've got English tutors. And there was 2 years I would go 3 times a week, drive 45 minutes, sit in someone's living room for 2 hours a night, 3 times a week, so they can get tutoring. Why? Because I didn't have anything better to do? No, because recognizing that the value is if you invest in them and you give them the solid foundation, it's easy for them to grow. If you don't invest in them, you're going to invest later on. You're going to invest one way. Either you're going to invest in ways you want to, or mercy God, that could deviate in a total different aspect. So I want the best for my children all around, and I'll do what I can. Now, do I make mistakes along the way? I absolutely do. Do I have some ways that some might not agree with? I'm sure I could be rougher, and sometimes I may be a little intolerant. But I also believe in expansive. I think in balanced approach. So not only do I push them in tutoring and so forth, I also push them in horseback riding. I push them in math, but I also push them in sports and soccer and gymnastics and swimming. Do I also push them in English and French? Yes, I do. But I also push them because we tour and we travel and we go to different restaurants and take on different experiences. Do I push them in aesthetics? Yes, I push them to look the best, be the best, because I'm also pushing them that they also represent themselves. You know what? Life is about setting the journey, setting expectations, and helping them to give them the tools to help facilitate that. Long answer, but that's
okay. It's all right. Dr. Grace, question or conversation piece for you. We're talking about parent involvement, Black parent involvement with their children's education, being initiators. Did you have a chance to look at that in Jamaica as also in Canada? Have you studied both?
No, I only looked at Jamaica. However, the framework that was adopted or used was a North American framework that was done out of the University of Vanderbilt.
Okay.
In their family lab. But the thing at that time, the framework was being developed by Hoover Dempsey and Sandler, and they had actually said upon my when I introduced myself to them and the project that I was doing, they said, well, we have never done it outside of North America, so we are encouraging you to go ahead, use it, and let us know what the feedback would be. And interestingly enough, there were some things about the model that was obviously not appropriate for our environment, and so it showed some limitations. However, it was very useful in that it assisted us in having a better understanding of what motivates parents to become involved in the education of their children. Having established that, what are some of these behaviors that we can expect? How do these behaviors then translate into action, especially in the classroom? And one of the most profound things that we found was that parental involvement does not directly impact student achievement, but rather it directly impacts the attributes that students need to succeed. And by that I mean, when I say it does not directly impact it, is that you have other variables in between. There are the intermediary variables, such as the quality of the teacher, the quality of the instruction being provided by that teacher, the nature of the curriculum, and other variables in between there. But why parental involvement becomes so important is that it's the psychological aspect of learning that it directly impacts, such as goal setting, such as academic efficacy. In essence, when a parent looks at you and said, as AJ was just sharing, when you set expectations for your children and you follow through with those expectations with support, whether it's either instruction or encouragement, it shapes how it is that this child operates in the classroom. And as a result of that, for me, coming from not having studied much of psychology, but because of my focus was on transformative learning, I had a look at what about psychology is so important to learning. And one of the things we realized is that children have to come to school ready. And readiness here is not only about a physical state of readiness, but also a mental state of readiness. And so when I was growing up in Jamaica, I had a grandmother who had limited literacy, but you couldn't tell her that she could not transition or negotiate her space in the world. My grandmother had the most excellent memory. So through her memorization, she taught me how to read. She was a Christian woman. And so when it is that she needed to read her Bible, she would say, Grace, come and read the Bible for me. Psalm 23 was a very, very favorite one of hers. Of course, by that time, I don't want to be reading no Bible. I want to be outside playing with the boys. So usually I would skip a few verses here and there. But of course, because grandma's memories was so good, I, would get a little tap, for lack of a better word, that I'm being quite muted here, but just to realize, hey, Grace, I know what is expected. And so what that framed for me was an importance around education and literacy in particular. And so in my household, as I said earlier, what we kept on hearing was this: silver and gold will vanish away, but a good education will never decay. And so morning, noon, and night, you would hear that. Grandma would always remind us about the expectation that she has, that when we leave and go to school, you go to school to learn. And when you go to school to learn, it's so that you can do better by the generation that is coming after you. But I wanted to also pick up on a few things that AJ mentioned about his level of parental involvement, which I think needs to be emphasized. Whether it is in Jamaica, whether it's here, there is the need for us to understand that the home-school relationship is a partnership, yes, and a partnership with defined roles and responsibilities. Regrettably, sometimes the school falls short, sometimes the parents fall short, but I believe in accountability. And as such, especially now and in this very racialized environment, where regrettably we're seeing the data coming out of the Toronto District School Board. This is their 2017 survey, if I'm not mistaken, that many of our Black children are underperforming. And as such, as a parent, my signals would go up right there. It's If they are underperforming, where are they underperforming? Why are they underperforming? And what can I do? In most instances, the school may not readily provide you with information, but this is where your advocacy, and if you want to call it militancy, comes in. Because, I don't believe that, within an environment of such rich resources, that anyone should be falling behind. And therefore, there ought to be a certain level of accountability. The schools are one of the things I've come to realize, having just returned to Toronto after 20 years of living in Jamaica, is that the system it has a lot of information. Parents get become knowledgeable, become informed about what the expectations of the school are, so that you can hold them accountable and advocate on behalf of your children. I know that there is oftentimes this sense that school knows best. Not in all cases. You
Mm.
are schools. If school knows best, you also know best, and you know what is appropriate, and what you require of your child, and also what is required of the school. And therefore, I say demand what is right. Advocate on behalf of your children.
Okay.
You know,
Uh,
I'd love to
Go
respond to
ahead.
that, or to just give examples. Because you asked me a question earlier on, and I, Doctor there gave us a great thing that brought back to my brain. When I was growing up, I remember I was in school, and advocacy is something that I saw, and I think it's very important for many reasons. Because not only you're teaching your children how to stand up and how to fight, but you recognize that in the lack thereof, but therefore go I. When I was in grade 8, I remember I had a challenge, and a lot of the children that had, again, shared my hues, it was ironic how they were being, streamlined off to one side, streamlined. Anytime they didn't know the answers to questions, that's the time they'd ask questions. When we'd have our hands up and saying right to answers, we were being marginalized from the community or from the classmates. We weren't answered, and so a lot are taught to they're taught to a certain extent that you are less than, and you're taught in funny ways. So if you don't advocate, anyways, my personal experience when I was in grade 8. As I said, from the time I was 6 years old, I knew what my trajectory was. I knew I was going to university. I actually knew which university I was going to. I knew the whole aspect. My grade 8 teacher, I knew that in order to get to university, you had to take advanced courses. So I chose advanced all the way through. My grade 8 teacher, left my elementary school, went to my high school, and changed all my advanced courses to general. And he told me that I should pick up a skill, be a mechanic. And there's nothing wrong to be a mechanic or a skill, but that's not his choice to make. That was so far out of line. Well, I was very fortunate that, to say I had a bear of a mother that was sat down there and had absolutely, that fought like crazy. It was a total different thing. But if we had that teachers know best, the school knows best, where would I be? I've been so many, even with my child now. So my son, for example, on several occasions, there was a challenge at school, as kids do. There was, arguments, or there's fights, or there's disagreements, or somewhat. And I get a call from my son. It says, "Dad, they sent me down to the office." I come down there and say, okay, from the moment I hear, I say, "Son, just tell me quickly what happened." He tells me what happened. I go down to the office. I go down to find out. And while I'm on route to school, the school calls me and tells me the scenario and how they're disciplining the child and so forth and so forth. I get to the school to find out. Now, listen, if there's an altercation of any kind, there takes two. There have to be two. But yet I get down to the school, and it's only my son they're trying to reprimand. Again, well, let me just say in very polite terms that in no shape, no kind of way, as long as there's breath in anyways, I won't go into the details, but that was totally unacceptable. And I definitely had to fight. But the reality is, a lot of parents, they just naturally aspire to back down and just go along with it without even questioning, without asking. No, you as a parent, you have to advocate for your child
So let me
for
just
many reasons.
Yeah, let me just say that, and it's a good point. And one of the great friends of the Dr. Vibe Show, Divine Right, says, yes, advocacy is so important. What is preventing many Black parents to be more involved in their children's education from a research perspective or from a personal perspective? Because, Anton, I'll be honest, I have a feeling that you're a rarity, not a rarity, but you're in the minority when it comes to a Black parent, especially a Black father, being involved in your child's education. So from a research perspective and from a parent's perspective, what are some of the barriers that are preventing it not being better?
From the research perspective, what we have noted is limited information about how to. As I said earlier in the program, that the research, in addition to growing research, is suggesting that parents want to be there. However, knowing how to be there is also another issue. And so if a structured environment isn't there for me to participate, I am going to make a choice between, oh, well, I have to be at work, to earn the money to be able to send my child to school or to provide the material resources for their existence. So there are competing responsibilities, yes, but nevertheless, schools need to take a leadership role in helping parents know what are the best ways and providing multiple options too by which they can become involved. I think in addition to that, there's a perception, there's a prevalent notion that school is the responsibility of the teacher, and as a parent, I should stay outside of it. Yes. So in a sense, the school becomes a territory almost of teachers and teaching. And that can be very problematic, as Anton shared earlier on with his experience. The teacher doesn't have the right to determine what his trajectory is. The teacher's right, however, is to prepare him, recognizing where he wants to go and providing him with the mental resources to be able to get there. So it can become very problematic when families or the home relinquishes its responsibility of advocacy, of participating and being engaged in the education of their children just to the school. One of the examples that we have seen of this, and again from research, is that where the students whose parents are absent they're the ones who are usually left behind. And so we need to be very, very careful of that. And I think too, there's also the issue by which the school environment has become very feminized. And as a result, especially like for men, for fathers who want to become involved in the education of their children, the environment is just not very accommodating. And so I'm of the view that schools have to have, it can be a one size approach, yes, one size fit all approach. It has to be multi-pronged and taken from different perspectives to see if your strategy right now for getting your parents involved isn't working. It's not that the parents aren't interested. Take a look at your strategy. Your strategy may also need to be refined or interrogated or literally thrown out and redone. But I think at the heart of it, what must be recognized is that parents, you need to be involved in your child's life. And if you can make a commitment this new academic year to do that, and to also advocate, mobilize yourselves in your various communities as a parent teachers association or groups, and not just about going to school when there's a problem, but going to school to check in. Yes, partner with the teachers, get to know them, and so that they can get to also understand and know the language and the expectation of the school environment, so that you're better able to speak to it, to speak truth to power, and of course, as I said before, to advocate in a meaningful way that will have impact, positive impact at that.
Okay, Anton.
From a parental perspective now, I think Dr. Monroe there gave some very good points But I'll tell you this, I think as a whole, you're basically seeing the chickens come home to roost. We've been socialized to a certain extent to be submissive to authority. And oftentimes what is positioned as school as those are the authoritarians, so therefore they know best.
Yes.
And so therefore they're teaching stuff that you don't know. I don't want to look stupid, or I don't know, so just trust. And that mentality, it's a taught behavior. It's a taught behavior why, when it comes to education, a lot of parents, they don't read, and not they don't read, is they're not as engaged, because the school system, unless you take deliberate effort, you're not engaged because it's not engaging. Growing up, I remember when African studies was coming up, man, I was like, dear God, we're seeing people running around in huts, yet when we talk about European culture, we'd see, these mass castles and Lord this and Bishop that. And so from then it's been taught, they're the one in best. You go to your work environment, and who's oftentimes the one in charge is oftentimes they don't look nothing like you. So they know best. So they're making the decisions. So then they know best. You go into the penal system, and the judges and the lawyers, they don't look like you, so they know best. And so therefore they know the system. I come to the school, and sometimes I'm coming directly from work, so I have a suit tie on, and I'm coming, and they're like, oh, wow, and I see it. The kids will say, oh my God, what does your dad do? And it's just a whole mentality that the structure is, let's show that we know better, so therefore let them submit unto us. And that's the mentality that they've been fostering, and that's just what you're seeing. That's why oftentimes you don't see, people are shocked. Why are people so shocked that Harris is now going for VPs? Why is it 2020 is coming? Is that blacks didn't have the brain capacity, the emotional capacity that they aimed before, or that the structure is set up to a certain extent to disenfranchise and make us stay distant? The system is set up to maintain itself, and the system, it says, okay, we will target a few, not target, but we streamline a few this way and streamline masses that way, and the masses, as long as they're good, let them eat cake. Let the masses eat cake, but ours will have the crumbs. No, and my mentality have always been, as I said from my young, I think it's part of my personality and what my parents is. I'm an alpha male, as they call it, and so I'm not putting it just because you tell me that. Show me why. Tell me why. Explain. Because you're a teacher and you have some education that therefore I got education too. I got education in the States, Canada, and gone back up. So what can you tell me? My brother's a superintendent of schools. What can you tell me? Listen, and guess what? But education in itself, I've known from the time I was young, education in itself is not necessarily an indicator of intelligence. It means an indicator of access. You might have had access. You might have had the resources others didn't. So that in itself has never been to me. It's never been because so and so said so. Therefore, it's gospel. No. From the time I was young, as I said, everyone. I don't care if you're a president or you're the janitor. I respect everybody, but I do not elevate them. We're all on equal stature, and the mentality is we have to give ourselves the understanding that you are enabled, and even if you don't have understanding what they're saying, it's okay. Sit down there and you can go and learn. Ask them the question. When you said this, well, what are you doing with other students? Why it only seems to be my students? For example, in my case, how is it that two children have a fight and only one student is going down to the office? Explain this to me, and why you think that shouldn't happen. Explain that to me, and hold them accountable to a set of common sense. And common sense is not necessarily common to all. You know what? We have to understand that our perspective, our cultures, our views, whether from an educated perspective or not, is even more so important than the educators, because the educators at the end of the day, and I'm not saying that they all are, but some just want a paycheck. This is your child. This is your child. This is not just what they're going to do on their grave. This can necessarily affect their trajectory in life for generations to come.
Absolutely.
If you want your child to achieve, they have to know that there's someone fighting for them.
Absolutely.
And if they know someone's fighting for them, that when they get their anniversary, they get their adversaries in life, then they know they can fight too.
Yes.
But if they don't see someone fighting, they don't even know how to fight. They don't know how to stand. And I'm not talking about being, sitting down there and being aggressive. No, you don't have to be aggressive, but you have to make sure that you're known. You're not going to sit down there and make judgments on my life. No. I'll be the head and not the tail. If you want to be the tail and you want all the other children to be the tail, I say your business that. No, that's not for me. That's not for me. That's not for my child.
Yes.
So that's for me, from my perspective.
All right. Well, geez, I got two more conversation topics, but we only have so much time. So I'm going to go with this one. What effect has 2020 had on this subject? And how should parents now, if it was a challenge for many before, what do they have to put in action even more so now, since many of our Black children have not been in a 5-day school in a environment 5 days a week since mid March. And just before we get there, Divine Right says my son's elementary school has only 1 or 2 Black male teachers and not even a handful of men as teachers of a staff of about 65. That's a problem. I was going to get into that conversation topic. We're going to have them come back in because that's a whole other conversation in itself. So that was the ping pong I was having in my head, that conversation topic, because many people may not realize 80% of the educators in the elementary school system are white women.
For sure.
That's a whole other conversation. So I will go with the 2020 and September. Yeah, in September, because September's around the corner, and some kids are going to go back full time, some blended. So, what has been the effect on many of our Black children, and then what's been what do parents need to do, because they've had a challenge before. The challenge is now amplified.
Absolutely. And I think you said it well there, Dr. Vibe, in that 2020, whatever issues that there were in the system, issues have been significantly exacerbated because of the pandemic. But even more so, it's the psychological and the mental effect that this has had on our students. As you have noted, I work with the Leadership by Design program, and we've been, ever since COVID back in March, we've been doing our internal checks with them via surveys, and a lot of the surveys are showing, I beg your pardon, is that the students have been very negatively affected by the rapid shift in their lives, especially the physical isolation. And as such, there's some things that our parents need to do. First of all, it's where you haven't been advocating in terms of what are the resources within the schools that can assist our students with getting the mental health support that they need. Find it. There's supposed to be programs in place. If it's not within the school, the schools are supposed to provide access to other things. If I'm not mistaken, there's a parent coordinator across all the district school boards. Get to know who your parental coordinator is and have a conversation with them around how can I continue my advocacy for my child. In addition to that, there's also the limited the learning loss that has occurred because of COVID. I know there's an issue when it comes on to tutoring programs, that we have a thinking that tutoring is only when you're experiencing learning challenges. Well, that's one reason, but there's another reason why tutoring is important. It also is there to help you to accelerate one's learning. So where at all possible, parents, get your students engaged or involved in these activities. And of course, as I said again, I can't say it enough, look out for their mental health and well-being. And finally, it's for those parents who were not involved before. Now more than ever, you are being called upon to stand in the gap for your child, because there's so much that is happening, that will definitely affect your child, that will definitely affect their career pursuits, and the quality of their life, and their life successes. And as AJ said before, don't allow anybody to disenfranchise your child. Don't give anybody else the power to do that with your permission, because when you're not involved, that's what you're doing. You're giving someone else permission to disenfranchise your life. I think right now enough is enough, and we therefore need to, one, as a village, prepare ourselves in terms of becoming more informed about what the resources are that are available across the school. Understand the language of the school. Check what the school policies. You all have access to the school's website. Find out what those are and become informed and advocate. This time now more than ever is where you're going to be needed. AJ?
Well, yeah. So you asked a 2-point question, and I'll try my best to answer it. So how was this time? I'll be very honest and truthful. It was a challenge. It was definitely a challenge. I think for any and every parent that has gone through this past experience, man, it was a learning curve. Well, as I mentioned, I've had tutors for my kids from they were years, but not like this, where you were not only doing their schoolwork, but you're trying to work remotely from your home as well, and going through, and then keeping them both focused when they're in 2 different grades, 2 different so it was a real challenge, and it took some time to get adjusted to it, and learning from it. Now I'm going to say a couple of things going forward. What should parents do going forward? Well, one, to my brothers and sisters, listen to me. I mean no disrespect here, but the key is you need to get involved in your child's success, not just in a singular aspect. Their trajectory and focus should not be just sports. Yes, sports is an access to scholarships and all the rest of it, and it's great that they can do every dunk and every dance in the world. That's great. But put part of the effort that you would put into putting them in basketball leagues. At this time, this is a great opportunity. A lot of those leagues aren't there. Get them a tutor. A tutor is not. So, quick background. One of the programs I put for my kids is a math program, and they compete 3 times a year. And when they go to compete, there's 5,000, between 3,000 and 5,000 people in there, of which it's all Asian and Chinese and maybe 50 black kids there. Then we sit down and say, it's only because those groups, well, they're smart. No, it's not that they're smart. It's they're using they're dedicating resources to it. So what does that mean? Get involved and get your kids help before they need help. Put them ahead. Give them the resources so that you don't know. Once I started doing it with my child, at first they were resistant to it. Of course, no child wants to do the work. But once they started to not only catch on, and they started to skip ahead, and their confidence, their comfortability, their aptitude towards learning it's transformational. You can really change your child's desire to learn. Oftentimes they don't, because they don't think they know how to. So what can we do? Get involved. Get involved. Yes, in their sports. Yes, keep that going. We seem to have that down pretty good. But get involved in education. Get involved with helping them understand where their strengths are. You know what? Our kids can be more than doctors, lawyers, teachers, social workers, and nurse. No. Understand what their brain types are. Are they more into systems? Well, then help them with that. Get them the skills. Also interact with their teachers. Understand now what they're doing, why they're doing it. Make sure, talk to your child. How do your interaction with your teachers? Understand how to guide. Understand how to fight and how to advocate. Teach them. So what that's going to need is they're going to teach yourself as well. And you know the funny thing is about this? I'll tell you this right now. Your kids don't care so much if you know what you're doing, but that's you're taking the effort to teach them, and you're involved with them. That will make world of difference to the child. Even if you're wrong, show them that you are doing the best that you know for them. And that's it. So those are the main things. Yes, there's so many different ways we can go into that, because you hit on a hot note. It wasn't until I went away to a private school that I had my first black teacher. And then I finally went down to the States. I had many black teachers, but I had one black teacher when I came back to UFT. One. So in Canada, other than private school, I only had one black teacher my whole scholastic career. That's absolutely ridiculous. And so they sit down and say, Obama, what effect did Obama have? Well, I won't go into the politics of that one, but the fact is that we saw someone that looked like us. We saw someone that it's possible that, you know what, if I don't know, at least he's a safe person I can go to, that he can relate to some of my pain. Let your kids know that, you know what, there's other kids just like them that, you know what, you can relate to the pain, but you can overcome the pain. And tell them some of your challenges. I tell my child, so listen, when I was growing up, I didn't study so much. The truth be told, I procrastinated with some of my courses. And here was the effect. And let me show you what happened when it happened. And as I show, okay, Dad, you can, now I advise companies. Well, how do you do that? Well, so let me show you how I do it. So, you know, bring some of your personal experiences to them. You know, the reason why I advise companies on what to do and how to develop strategy and so forth, I say, well, this is what you got to think about. Think about this. So strategically, if a company wants to choose this is what you got to consider. You, my son, you, my daughter, you want to have this success. How would you go about making your business? What are the things that you got to consider? Look around. How could you make that better? Show based upon your experience. If you're a plumber, if you're a janitor, if you take your experience and teach them, bring that into the scholastic learning. Make it so it's practical, so they think they can actually utilize some of the stuff they're learning. Because some of the kids, the truth be told, growing up and hearing about Pythagorean theorem, how does that affect me? Oftentimes schooling is not, it doesn't engage them because it's not engageable, but you can make it so. If the kids love sports, teach them in accordance to sports. Teach them to learn the statistics. Teach them to read on how different players. Get them reading. There's so many things I can go on, but I know time is limited and I don't want to over monopolize on time, but get involved, be involved with the students, be involved with their teachers, be involved with their programs, and let their teachers know that you're involved. Because oftentimes, if those teachers and those administrators oftentimes don't think you're involved, oftentimes that crack that they talk about, that people slipping through cracks, it's not a crack. It's a ground swell. It's an earth drop that many kids just drop in. Let them see that when they do something, you're going to question them on it. And if they don't do something, you're going to question them on it. Let them think if they're going to disenfranchise them, it's not going to be your child.
That's right.
And if they're going to advocate, sometimes advocate for the child that's not your child. Sometimes I go in there and I'll fight if I see another black kid. Why are you, what did that boy do? Why are you treating him that way? Why are you trying? Stand up. As a community, listen to me. It does take ability to raise a child. It may not be your child, but growing up, when I grew up in the church, for example, and the reality is, listen, if my mother wasn't there or my father wasn't there, it didn't matter. Because if Sister Johnson saw you doing certain thing, or Sister Beverly, believe you me, she'll drape you up too. That mentality, we got to care for our next generation. Care for your next generation, starting with your own, but don't limit it to that. Do you want to give back? My perspective. Oh, we lost you again. Can't hear you.
Strong, powerful words end off another epic conversation. Dr. Grace and AJ. Am I allowed to call you AJ?
No problem.
All right. I thought, AJ, I'd like to say thank you both for taking time to share with us. There has to be a part two, because obviously AJ was just getting warmed up. He's in the appetizer mode right now.
Believe you me, I'm ready to go.
That's the way I like it. Final comment here from Divine Right, saying 2020 is a whole show in itself. Virtual learning and lack of access, internet devices, laptops, language barriers, time, etc. for our parents has been a huge issue here. And she's located in the Washington, D.C. area, by the way. So this is not just a Toronto thing, a Canada thing. It's a North American thing. And I have a feeling it's a worldwide thing, especially when it comes to Black youth. Dr. Grace, if people want to get in contact with you, how can they do that?
They can contact me via email, Grace-Camille, that's with 2 L's, Munroe @gmail.com. That's Grace-Camille Munroe @gmail.com, or my LinkedIn site.
Fantastic. AJ, if people are brave enough to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Hey, listen, you know what? If anybody wants to get in contact with me, I'm an open book. I think, I think that's where we lack the most, where we oftentimes don't reach out to each other to find out how to get resources, what to do, connections. So if anybody wants to get in contact with me, it's very simple. My name's Anton James at Rogers.com. It's the ANTONJAMES@Rogers.com. Or call me on my cell phone if they want to get in contact.
Wow, the man giving his cell phone number. He's not playing.
Well, you know why? And you're hitting a hot point. So here's part of the challenge that we had. Part of it, there was a child at my child's school, and the difficulty was, they didn't have an internet at home. They didn't have a computer at home. And their child, I could see what was happening to their child. And I would say, contact them. She was so timid. The mother was so timid. They did not know how to fight or put the good fight up. How to fight for your child, where to get the resources, what resources they were available to. And so sometimes that's all they had was a phone. So I said, call me, let's have a conversation. Let's talk. And sometimes they just need to have a sounding board. They need to understand. They need to say, okay, look, you know what? I want to try to do this. Is it possible? I may not know, but guess what? Someone I know may know. Or, we are our brother's keeper. Ultimately, we're our brother's keeper. And more importantly, we may be our brother's keeper, but we're our child's keeper. And
Absolutely.
Not my child. I don't want my child to succeed and your child to fail. I want our child to succeed. You want to go on, again, I'm a strategist. So when I sit down and talk about how do we as a community progress, how do we, the Black Lives Matter is phenomenal that we're doing protests, but that's not nearly enough. It's really 7-pronged. But one of those prongs is we got to come together. And we're so afraid of sitting down there and this differentiating stuff. Well, we're doing good, so we're not like those. Well, no, we're just like those. By the grace of God, we've only have a few blessings that separate us. So if I can help anyone along the way in any way, career-wise, parent-wise, social-wise, idea-wise, I'm open. So
wonderful. Again, be careful what you ask for, my brother. I'm going to come after you.
It's okay, man. That's all right. No problem.
After you. Going to come after you.
Someone help me. So listen, it's my responsibility to help others too.
We need more of both of you and many more like both of you.
Thank you.
So we appreciate the I don't call what you do work. I appreciate the passion that you do in the past, the present, and in the future.
Thank you.
I am Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2018 Innovation Award winner, given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. One of the other things I do online is I host every month a conversation for fathers that is co-sponsored by Dad Central Canada's National Fatherhood Organization and Dove Men Care. If you want to find out more information about me, best place to do that is to go to my website. And my website address is www.thedrvibeshow.com. All things Dr. Vibe there. Contact information, posts. You can listen or watch replays of many of my 2,000 epic conversations. As always, I'd like to thank the people who helped make this possible, live-wise. And Divine Right, especially, thank you for chiming in and your great comments that helped make this conversation epic. Thank you so much. Hope all is going fine with you and your son, and we will get you on next month. I've been bad. Haven't had you on for a while, so it's my time to get you back on. Like to end off as usual. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions and then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. And always a big thanks, big up to BIA Media for making it an epic production. God bless, peace be well, keep the faith and walk good. Good night, everybody.